Buonasera, and good evening. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, dear colleagues, dear students, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to PISAI for the fourth lecture on this academic year. I'm delighted to welcome you to this library dedicated to Maurice Bormans. PISAI continues its mission at the service of the Christian-Muslim dialogue that Father Bormans and the missionaries of Africa have promoted for a more humane society in which Christians and Muslims can meet, live, and work together as brothers and sisters. The role of this institute is undeniable in the field of dialogue with Muslims in the world, in the Middle East, and even in Europe. And as you know, we are at the month of Ramadan, and wish all Muslims in Italy and in the world the best for this special and blessed month, and happy Eid al-Fitr that will come in a few days. I take this opportunity to congratulate Monsignor Diego, our professor, our friend, our brother in this institute, missionary of Africa, on his consecration as Bishop of Laguat. We wish you a fruitful ministry at the service of the church and of dialogue. What impact do religions have on international relations today? This is the title of our today's lecture, Religion and Politics, two key words for understanding our world. Christianity was founded by Jesus as religion of love. When the Pharisees and Herodians came to test him in his words, asking whether it was lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not, Jesus told them, "Give to Caesar what is Caesar's and to God what is God's." Initially, Christianity stayed out of politics for about 3 centuries, but after the peace of Constantine, state and religion became intertwined, and the emperor played a fundamental role in the administration of the church. It was not until the modern era that the order of separation of state and church was established under a secular law. The Second Vatican Council saw an advantage in this separation and independence so that each institution respected the role of the other. The document of the Council, the Dignitatis Humanae, affirms the freedom of the church is the fundamental principle in what concerns the relations between the church and governments and the whole civil order. In fact, modern freedom is a result of Christian thought. It is not something against our faith or values. According to many theologians, liberty, equality, and fraternity are 3 evangelical principles. Moreover, the same secularism is an opportunity to live our faith without being involved directly in political issues. Politicians must rule the city, and the church should help live according to the gospel and guide politics to create a humane society where all people have the same rights and duties. Unfortunately, in our today's world, we observe a competition between different types of fundamentalism. Religious slogans used after the establishment of the Islamic Republic of Iran, the West against the rest, neither East nor West, but Islamic Republic. In addition, the 3rd millennium began with a religious war. Political leaders have used religious language to fight enemy. After centuries, we have heard words like crusade. I quote George W. Bush, for example. And jihad in a political context that seeks to divide the world along religious lines. Religion is often cited as the motivating factor behind extremist ideologies, though political, economic, and social factors usually play a significant role. On the other hand, politics and religion have been connected since the beginning of Islam, with the establishment of the first state in Medina by the Prophet Muhammad, who cared about all the inhabitants of the city, be they Muslims, Christian, or Jews. Muslim caliphs tried to apply Sharia in Arab and Muslim societies, sometimes with justice and equality for all, but sometimes discriminating against Christians and Jews. Despite the secular Arab nationalism which had characterized Arab society in the 20th century, the emergence of political Islam complicated the situation in the Middle East and in Europe to put secularism back on the agenda, even though for many centuries we tried to reach a democratic state that respected all religions at the same level. Religion wants to replace the role of politics and rule societies according to Sharia. It goes without saying that the Arab Spring was a new experience where political Islam took power and tried to rule. But a few months later, Egyptians and Tunisians protested against it until it was defeated. So we thought it was the end of this new theocracy. However, other countries which were ruled by secular governments overthrew their leaders to hand over a new Islamist leadership. Afghanistan and Syria are now under Islamist power. I mean the Taliban and Hayat Tahrir Sham. In Europe, many questions have been raised in the last decade since President Macron's declaration against separatism. France, known for its secularism, laïcité, has faced challenges regarding the presence of religion in public life, particularly in relation to the Muslim community and the wearing of religious symbols in public space. The relations between religion and state has become a priority in any geopolitical analysis. That is why our today's speaker would answer this question with his knowledge and his long experience in the diplomatic field. Roland Dubertrand is the coordinator of the PISAI Chair on Mediterranean Religions and Societies. He has been a diplomat and former advisor on religious affairs of the French Ministry for Foreign Affairs, former ambassador of France to Oman and Chile, guest professor of geopolitics of religion in several academic institutions, and he got many awards and several publications on this topic. I would like to mention some of his publications, the book he wants to talk about today, Géopolitique des religions, Maoudoudi en penseur de l'islam politique, Vérité et dialogue chez Paul Ricoeur, le choc des civilisations, fantasmes aux réalités. And now, thank you, Monsieur Dubertrand, for your presence and for this lecture, and I pass the floor to you.
Thank you, Mr. President, for your kind words, and I'm very happy after 6 months spent in the PISAI for the organization of the chair on the Mediterranean religion and societies to give this lecture about the book, Geopolitics of Religion, this one that we wrote with Valentine Zuber and Blandine Chélini, two French academics and two friends, in 2019. And at this time, we have seen that there were no many books in French, in fact, about religion and international relationships, a little bit more in English in the United States in particular, no more in France. And we decided to try to make a kind of a panorama, overview of the impact of religions on the international relationships today. So in fact, it's not only about geopolitics. Geopolitics, you know, it's a part of the international relation, more related with the correlation of forces based on the natural resources between the states. And it's more specific. So we decided to have something broader about the different impacts. And it's true that because religion in the history of humanity is a global social fact, you will feel the influence of religion in many layers of the life of the individuals, of course, society, nations. And if you take international relationships, many layers too. And in the book, we spoke about war and peace, development, it's about ethics, many other humanitarian head and many other issues in the fields where you cannot understand exactly what is happening if you don't take into consideration the religious factor. So tonight, I will try to be brief and not to speak about all the different layers, in fact, but about two issues. First, the presence of the main religions in the world and the recomposition of this presence today with the impact on politics. And second, the very complex and sensitive theme of war and peace and religion, and which is always delicate to talk a little bit about that. But first, let me come back in this introduction about a theme which is important, which is the so-called return of religions, in French, retour du religieux, comeback of the religion. It's a theme for the scholars from the 70s, because in the international scene, something happened during the 70s with the Islamic revolution in Iran, first time with an Islamic regime in a big country in this region, 1979. 1979, too, the moral majority was created in the United States. It means the coalition of the Christian right for the first time organized. And of course, in 1978, the Pope, John Paul II, was elected in Rome with an impact on the international relationship that we know. So something happened with religion more visible. And I like an author, which is Jonathan Fox, because he wrote about that. And he say, it's not that the religion have disappeared before. They were less present in the mind of the scholars in the Western universities. And it was, and it is, a process of secularization in Europe in particular. Less in the United States, but in Europe it's quite clear. But it was not possible after the 70s for the scholars and for the analysts to deny that there was a strong presence and a capacity of mobilization of the religion on the international scene. So let us speak about that, return of religion. And Jonathan Fox say the religion have not disappeared. They have not disappeared before, but you have waves on the international scene. And when you have the rise of fundamentalist movements, it's much more visible and the impact is strong. So it's about the fundamentalists and it's about a wave. In fact, from the 60s, the 70s, till now, at least we don't know the end of that. It's true for Islam. I think it's true to another extent for Hinduism, for Protestantism, and so on. So we will talk about that. But in my first part, I want to talk about the recomposition of the religion at the global level, global stage today. And it's important to give the figures. There is an institution which is the Pew Research Center, giving quite good figures. In fact, could not be very accurate. You can imagine that. But if you take the global picture, the first religion in the world is Christianity. In 2015, 9 years ago, and there were 2.3 billion of Christians in the world. Now, of course, it's a little bit more with the demographic growth. Second religion, 1.8 billion, the Muslims. Third religion, Hinduism, 1.1. And the Buddhist is the fourth religion, 500 million of Buddhists. And the Pew Center say, and you have a category which is rising more in Europe than in the rest of the world, which are the non-believers, atheists, agnostic, non-believers without religion, which is a whole category, and it's around 1 billion people. It's something, you know, it's not a small group, and you have 400 million people for the traditional religions, being Africa, Asia, other parts, which is not small at all. It's 400 million people today. So if I take Christianity, and I don't want to make the history of Christianity, but what is interesting for us, that with the predication of Jesus, the religion is born in Palestine, of course, spreading in the Roman Empire and the Mediterranean, and after that, Europe. And the different part of Europe, you have the schism that you know with Orthodoxy in 1054, the Reformation, it's 1517. And after that, after the Reformation, you have an incredible spreading in the world with the colonial conquest of the West. At this time, the European powers, America, Africa, Asia too. So this explains that Christianity now, it's not only the first religion present in the North and in the South, but in the 5 continents. It's the religion which is more spread or distribute than the other one. And you have different categories, of course, and politically speaking, it's important. The Catholic Church is the first with it was 1.2 billion in 2015, the believers. Now it's around, with the official figures, 1.4 believers in the world. And the Catholic Church, what you can see first, is that it's a unified structure. You have the Pope, you have, of course, you have the Curia in Rome, you have an organization which is centralized, you have the conference, Episcopal Conference in the country. So you have all a net with a unified structure, which is not the case, as you know, of the Protestants or the Orthodox. And so it means that you have a power of action which is unique. You have a diplomatic net with the nuncio, a capacity to interact with the different regions of the world and to get the information. And it means that for the different countries like France or others, always interesting to discuss with the Vatican, because you can exchange information in view about the policies. So you have this kind of leverage. And you have 2, of course, humanitarian organizations like Caritas, the school, the university. So it's quite a unified and impressive net at the global level. The Protestant is different. It's exactly the contrary, because you have thousands and thousands of denominations. You have the old churches with Lutheran, Calvinist, Anglican, and you have the evangelicals coming from the different awakenings from the 16th century in the Protestant religion. But anyway, we talk for the 20th century and from the 70s in particular of the neo-evangelicals. And that's the point now, because for the Protestant, with thousands and thousands of churches and denominations, the historical Protestants are a minority. It's 1/3, and 2/3 now it's neo-evangelicals. It's 300 million for the Protestant, classical one, and it is 600 million for the neo-evangelicals. With the political power of the Vatican, is the capacity for the Pope and his church to speak with one voice, with one strong message. The Protestant, it's completely different, completely dispersed, but this neo-evangelical church have more and more political impact. for example, in the United States, and you know that Donald Trump was and is strongly supported by the coalition, the Christian right, and the evangelicals, they vote at 82% at the presidential election for Donald Trump. They had this power in Brazil, they have a lot of power in Latin America too, and in other parts of the world. So that is political factor too with the evangelicals. And you have the orthodoxy, 200 million people, with they knew the persecution with the communist regimes in the East. Now they are gaining ground again in some way because they are two very secularized countries, including Russia. But the churches have regained some position in the society, and you have what is called Caesaropapism, so a special relationship between the state and the church. We are seeing that, in fact, in Russia. The Patriarch Kirill has decided to support Vladimir Putin 100%, including losing position in Ukraine, but he decided that, so you have the strong link between the state and the church. That's for Christianity today in some words, and of course, Islam, we say it's 1.8 billion of people in the world. It's 1.6 for the Sunni. It's a clear majority. We don't know exactly, but around 200 million for the Shia and 1 million for the smaller school, which are the Ibadit, mainly in Oman, but very small group. Islam, as you know very well, in PISAI here, and I will not make the history again, but it's interesting to see that from the predication of the prophets and the Arabic Peninsula, it was a quick and strong process of military conquest till Spain, until the Indus. Very strong and impressive at this time. But after that, after the conquest, you have a spreading, which is more by the merchant, peaceful means, the caravans towards Africa through the Sahara, with a presence more important of the Muslim in the northern part and the Sahel and Sudanese part of Africa. And you have an expansion by trade and contacts, Central Asia till China, till now, and East Indonesia. Indonesia today, the most important Muslim country in the world. It's more than 200 million of Muslim in Indonesia. So that's the point about the expansion. With the 20th century, there are big change because of the loss of the caliphate in 1924, which is suppressed in Turkey. The fights against the colonization, so the rise of the Arab nationalism, independencies, and the rise of political Islam. And the rise of political Islam started with the creation of the Muslim Brothers in 1928 in Egypt. After you have moments, it seems to be of a kind of discrete consolidation. And after the 70s and the Iranian Revolution, you have the rise, which is true in all this world. And at the same time, you have obstacle for the rise of political Islam, because today you have only 4 countries. Well, some important country, but only 4. You have Iran with the Islamic Revolution. You have the Taliban, again, twice. You have Syria, which is completely new from December 24. And you have Turkey, which is a very different kind of political Islam in a different country, but with inspired by the Muslim Brothers. But it's 4 countries. And the Islamic world is broader than that. And so till now, it's difficult to analyze, I think, for the observers, but it's like a kind of a rise, a strong wave movement Olivier Carré, the French author, he say there is a capacity of mobilization of political Islam. We are obliged to recognize that. But you have strong resistance to the traditional Islam, Sufi, liberal Islam, the regime, the state, and so, and it means that it's not done. We don't know, we'll talk about that in the conclusion, but we don't know the outcome of all this, but it is the main stake in the Islamic world today, politically speaking, with a geopolitical implication, of course. Hinduism, the third. Hinduism, it's really the religion which is a civilization too, because it's Indian civilization, and it's a big majority in India today. And you know that the Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, from the BJP, had a strong agenda to try to impose Hinduism like the true political national identity against minorities. It means against the Muslim first. There are 175 millions of Muslims in India, which is not few, and the Christians, but you have the other religion like the Sikh, the Jains, and other. India is very rich in terms of religious life, but you have this agenda of political Hinduism, which is very strong, and today with the BJP. And you have Buddhism. Buddhism, it's more, the religion was born in India, but in fact, it's the religion of the Far East. Now it's more China, Japan, Thailand, Birmania, all these countries, and we'll talk again about Buddhism when we will talk about China here in a little bit. But we have to note that it's an important, it's not very well seen in the West, that you have a kind of competition between India and China about Buddhism. Of course, you have the main issue of the Tibetan Buddhism with the Dalai Lama, which is a big problem for China, want to control more Tibet and the religion there. But on the global scene of the region, you have India promoting some places linked with the Buddha in India, and China promoting other in China in a logic of political competition between the two countries. It's part of this game. So that's the part about the religion, and I will come back on that during the conclusion, but I will talk now about the second issue, which is religion, peace, and war, which is a complicated issue, as you know. I like to mention a French philosopher and writer, Régis Debray. And Régis Debray, he wrote a book about religions called Le Feu Sacré in French, and he say two things. It's like Brodel before him. He say if you take the different civilization in the world, the religion, that system of beliefs and rights, are at the very core of the different civilization in the time. And Brodel said that in Grammaire des Civilisations in 1963. You have civilization developing themselves in the long time, and the core, mental, intellectual, spiritual core, is there. And Régis Debray say, but if you have a religion, it means that you will unite the group. It's a strong factor of gathering, communion in the group with the same beliefs, same faith, but you will divide, separate this group from the others. So it will be, from a structural point of view, a factor of unity inside and a factor of separation outside. And it's a part, in fact, it's part of our problem now. It's about that. including if when we talk about war and peace, it's not only about religion, of course. You have different degrees, I think, because you could have a war, open war, directly linked with the religious beliefs and convictions. And the war of religion in Europe in the 16th century was Protestant against the Catholic. It was in France, it was in Germany, which is now Germany. It was clearly about two sets of belief, or to be Christian, one set Catholic, one set Protestant, and a kind of incompatibility between the two system of beliefs. It was resolved by military and political way after that, but it was a fight of beliefs. You could find that too in the modern world, but perhaps less. And if you take the religious conflicts in the modern world, you have religious factors, but at the same time, you could have many other factors. For example, the war, you remember the civil war in Lebanon, it was 1975, 1990. It was a fight between the Christian and the Muslims in Lebanon, with many other factors, political, Palestinian, the economy, social, and so. You had the fight too between Catholic and Protestant in Northern Ireland, the same. You have the religious touch, of course, between the two communities. It's about the beliefs, but it's not only about the beliefs. And you have the case of Sri Lanka between Hinduists and Buddhists, with a very long and a very tough war. It was not only about the belief, it was about other things in Sri Lanka. But I want to mention something too, which seemed to me interesting, and it's linked with the return of the religion. Because if you have a return of religion in the 70s, after the Cold War, it's clearer than before, because you have the fall of the ideologies. It's no more about capitalism and communism, and it will be more the politics of identity. And a study say that if you take the internal conflict in the world, in 1975, it means during the Cold War, you have 25% of the conflict with an express religious justification by the actors themselves, 25%. And the rest, it was more about revolution and the ideology and so. If you take the same study in 2004, it's 70% of the actors or the conflicts, the actors say religious justification. Perhaps it's not so clear at the end of the day, but at least at the level of the expression and justification, the set of expression has changed from socialist revolution or no, and from religious identity of my community against the other one. And interesting case for that is what happened with the Islamist terrorism of jihadism in the Islamic world, you know, with Al-Qaeda and Daesh. In the long history of the Islamic world, it's possible to see a small, very violent group with an agenda of killings. Best known for everybody, the sects of the assassins in Iran and in Syria, killing Sunni leaders they didn't like. You have the sect of the Kharijit, very violent too against the caliphs, and they were suppressed. The assassins were destroyed. The Kharijit were suppressed too, and the Ibadites, it's a part of the non-violent part of the Kharijit, but the sect anyway was suppressed. So you have this kind of surge of the kind of terrorist violence, let's say, including in the Middle Age. Which is new, I think, in that you have Osama bin Laden creating Al-Qaeda at the end of the 80s in Afghanistan, telling we will make the global jihad. That's something new. You say it will be the global jihad against the United States, the Westerners, the Crusaders, or the Westerners, and the Jews. We are a small group, activists, but we have the right path in Islam. If necessary, we can kill the bad Muslim leaders, and at the end of the day, the Westerner will be obliged to withdraw for the land of Islam. That was the program. And that, of course, it's new, and including for the traditional Islamic philosophy or thought, it was a big challenge because it means that it's not the case where the jihad is decided by the normal political and religious authority. It's decided by the militant, by the activists themselves. It's an individual jihad, so it has not to be collective by all the community. And you can decide takfir. So you can say, this person is not a good Muslim or good Muslim leader, I will kill him. By a decision of a small group of activists, which is not the decision, because if you had in traditional Islam to declare takfir, it has to be a high-ranking religious authority, and it's quite rare, in fact, to do that. So it was a new set of things. It's true that it was crashed by the Western coalition, first in Afghanistan, the United States and allied with bin Laden, and after international coalition with the Westerners, the Arabs, and the Kurds against Daesh. And so Daesh was crashed in 2017, yes, 2017 around. And but you have, of course, small groups and continuing in the region, in Europe, in other places. You have what we call in French filial, the group affiliated. So it's not done, including if Al-Qaeda and Daesh were really hit strongly, but it's not completely finished. That is about religion and violence. And you have the last events with Gaza and the 7th of October of 2023. And a scholar like Gilles Kepel tried to mention to the religious aspect in that. You have two aspects, I think. The first one is that in the Israeli government, you have the group from the extreme right. We are religious Zionists with a very strong agenda on Gaza and on the other occupied territory, the West Bank, for religious reasons. They say God has given to the Jewish people all the land, the promised land. We have to recuperate the integrality of the land. So there is no role, no place for the Palestinian, but there is no place for negotiation. You will not negotiate about something God has given to you. That's the position of the Zionists and religious. They are members of the government, and they are strong, and you see the influence they can have. They have to on the development of the war. That's for true, trying to avoid concession or negotiation. And for the other side, you have Hamas, which is a radical Islamist movement. It's not a movement of the global jihad, because Hamas, for the Palestinian, and Hezbollah, for the Lebanese, it's not about the global jihad against the West. It's about a fight of liberation of the land, being in this case, the Islamic Palestine, but with the project to create an Islamic state, and the fact that Islam has to recuperate the holy Islamic lands and Jerusalem in particular. So you can imagine the resolution of the conflict. It's much more difficult in this condition when you have the religious factors inside, because you have to solve a political problem, which is the problem of people and land, and you can try to distribute or to share the land for the people, and to try to confront a religious deep problem rooted in history. Let me talk now about the contrary. It means the search of peace and the religions. And what is interesting for me is that from the beginning of the process of dialogue between the religions, it was this matter of peace, unity, trying to reach the kind of reconciliation and peace. For example, it was quite a famous meeting of the Parliament of Religion. It was in 1893 in Chicago, in the United States. It was called the Parliament of Religions, with different religions gathering, and you have gathering of this Parliament of Religions till now, in fact. And I think that after the 70s, rise of religious matters, political Islam and terrorism, 2001, with the strike against Washington and New York in the 11th of September, you have this feeling of the religious leaders that it's necessary to talk and together and to act together for peace. And there is, for some of them, and for the Islamic leaders too, and I saw that when I was in Oman, the willingness to say, no, that is not Islam, what is happening. So we want to act with the Christian and the other for an agenda of peace, because we want to demonstrate that this terrorism, it's not us. And I was discussing it in Oman, in the Sultanate of Oman, with the religious leaders, Ibadi and Sunni there, and they say, we want to participate in the dialogue because our agenda is to show to the world, to the others, other religion and other people, that us, the Muslims, we are not this group of the bunch of terrorists. Of course, this has an impact too. If I take the example of the Catholic Church, you have the Council of Vatican II, with Nostra Aetate, with a strong rise for the inter-religious dialogue with the agenda of peace, action in common. You have the meeting of Assisi in 1986 between the religions convoked by the Pope John Paul II. You have the action of the community Sant'Egidio to try to make peace by mediation when it's possible. In Mozambique, for example, you have the action of the Holy See between Chile and Argentina in 1978 on the Canal of Beagle to solve the matter. The two countries, Chile and Argentina, were really on the brink of the war. And it was this arbitrage of the Pope who allowed them to solve the situation. I can mention too the Declaration of Human Fraternity by the Pope and the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar in Abu Dhabi. That was 2019, and the other declaration in Jakarta with the Muslim Authority of Indonesia. So you have all these. I don't say that every action in common will be efficient, no, but it sent a message in the world. And in many cases, it was to a possibility to calm down some situation. Myself, when I was advisor for religious affairs in Ministry of Foreign Affairs in France, I saw that it was a crisis in the Republic of Central Africa in 2013. and with fighting between groups, with the state and groups, with implying Muslims and the Christians. And the Archbishop, Catholic Archbishop of Bangui, the president of the Protestant churches of Central Africa, the Grand Imam of Bangui, they decided to make a tour of the country to explain to all the community, not in our name, but it's not a religious war. We know that there are some interests at stake, and it's fight about power, resources between the states and the group, and so, but it's not something between the Catholic, the Protestant, and the Muslim. And for a time, it worked. You know that the problems of RCA are not solved today, but for a time, in 2013, it had some impact about the situation, and the political leaders were not capable to do that. But the religious leaders had the capacity anyway. So that is about peace and war. The conclusion, I would like to say a word on the clash of civilization and Samuel Huntington, but it's an interesting view. After the Cold War, Samuel Huntington, so American scholar, and he wrote an article in 1993 in Foreign Affairs about the new situation of the world. It was quite bold because you have all the old analysis, but it was necessary for the new time to create and to try to give a new explanation about what was happening. And he say that the end of the Cold War, that the end of the Soviet Union, and it will be the end of the great confrontation between capitalism, democracy, and communism. China was always and is always a communist country, but he say at the world level it's over, and China rejoined capitalism, in fact, conserving the Communist Party and adapting to the capitalist world and the market economy. And he said the future will not be about that. It's over. It will be about the confrontation, not always the war, but the confrontation between the 7 big civilizations in the world. And he gave his list. He said, you have Western civilization, United States, Europe, Catholic and Protestant. You have the Orthodox civilization, Orthodoxy in Russia and so. You have the Islamic civilization. You have African civilization, Indian civilization, and the Chinese one for the Far East, and the 7th, Latin America. I think you can, I like a lot Latin America, but I think you can discuss, because Latin America is too really strongly part of the Western civilization. In fact, but anyway, you say we have around 7 civilizations. The country could adopt market economy in the different civilizations, and you see they will do that. They could accept, for some of them, liberal democracy. Some did and others not. But at the end of the day, it will be about culture, different history, different identities, and it will be the clash. And of course, after the bombings of the 2001, many persons refer to Huntington telling that the beginning or the start of the immense clash of civilization, in particular between the West and the Islamic world. At the same time, I think you need to consider with respect the thesis of Huntington, but it's not all the reality of the world today. You have the interest of the nation, of the states, and if you try to analyze the international relationships today, you have first the national interest of the states and the competition, the classical old competition of the of the states on the international scene. You have this fracture too between democracy and authoritarian regimes, including if Trump is changing that. The fact that Donald Trump is very troubling for everybody, but it's changing the division we know. So you have different consideration, not only religious and cultural. But I think that we can say two things about that. First thing is that you have to integrate, of course, the religious factor, which is your analysis of the long term with the civilization, like the core of the structure of civilization. And you have to think about a kind of interaction with the other factors today in the international relationships at short and middle term, which is a different task. It's a different story, but you have this factor intervening too. And to conclude and to have some time for debate, I will say that from my personal point of view, for an observer of international relations today on religion, you have four interesting themes. First one is the future of political Islam. It will be the rise or it will be the decline at middle term, of course. And Olivier Carré, the French scholar, he said that will be the decline of Islamism for the political failures, namely, and economic too. And he said it will be a kind of a post-Islamism to be defined. And it's true that you have strong powers like Saudi Arabia, Egypt, the Emirates, fighting against political Islam in the region strongly now. We can see that. So that's a question mark. What will happen with Islamism and political Islam for, let's say, the 10, 20 years coming? And another question which is linked, it's about the Israeli-Palestinian conflicts, very, very bad situation now, very, very, very bad. We will see one day a kind of perspective of resolution or not. If you can see, perhaps you could have a kind of appeasement in the region in part. If you could not see that, of course, that it will be a region in trouble for a long, long time. That's the first point. Second point is for the Western world and Latin America, the rise of the neo-evangelical. Not all, but the majority, they have a very conservative agenda. And in fact, this agenda is a link with the populist right in Europe, in the United States, in Latin America, where they'll be rising. And it means with populist right taking power in more countries with the support or not. That's a question about the fate of the Western world. And you see that with the Catholic Church, it's interesting about something. The church is online with the neo-evangelicals movements on ethic, moral, sexuality, for example, but not on the social issue like migration and other, with the Catholic Church with much more progressive views, in fact, than the main evangelical or neo-evangelical churches. Third point is India. India will be a great power rising. It's the most populated country in the world today, before China. And you have this agenda about Hinduism. What will happen with the agenda? Because India is a democracy, but you have strong pressure on the minority. What will happen in India, and what will happen for the projection of Hinduism in the world? Modi has the idea to give a kind of international scope to Hinduism. What will happen with that? And the last question for me is about China, because China, from the 80s, the Chinese, the communist government with Deng Xiaoping, they started the economic reforms at the end of the 70s, and it worked quite well. And during the 80s, they decided a kind of liberalization of the religious fields. And from that, you have a kind of effervescence, explosion of the religion, the religious life in China, and mainly with the traditional religion of China and Confucianism, Taoism, Buddhism, but you have two for the Christian, and there was the agreement between the Catholic Church and in China, and you have the Muslim strong Muslim community, and you have at the same time strong repression that could be for the Buddhist in Tibet, that could be against the Muslim, of course, in Xinjiang, against some sects, and the regime wants to keep the control of what is happening with the religious movement at the level of the country. But you have this incredible vitality of the religion and sect in China, and the question is if the regime could keep the control of the situation or not. I think the big question mark for the future. And I stop about that, and thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, so much, Mr. Dubertrand, Mr. Ambassador, for this very, very clear lecture. And I'm really very grateful that you gave us this speech, very clear in English too, that you accepted that. I think it is really rare, some French diplomat who speaks English without reading. I thought that he would read all time, but really this capacity to speak English without any problem, that's really impressive. So I'm very grateful. I thank you very much for this synthesis, very clear about geopolitics of religion in the world, in China, in India, in Europe, in Latin America, in the Middle East too. It is really impressive, I say, because really nobody has all this knowledge. I don't hide you that at the beginning when you came to PISAI, that I thought we could have some difficulties to working together, because you have another formation as a building as diplomat, but really it was for me a I'm very grateful, because really you have this intellectual, theological, philosophical, political building formation. So it's very beautiful. So you gave us this clear idea about the world from your experience and from your writings. I read something, but it was very much more clear after this speech. I want to ask you if I can start. So just, do you think this theory of clash of civilizations of Samuel Huntington will continue by the administration of Trump? Is that possible? Does he believe in that, or would he change his view of the world and the division of the world? What do you think about it?
Yes. We are between us, I think, no? And Donald Trump, it's first of all a kind of conception of policy of defense of the national interest, defined in very rude and very crude terms, and it's about the resources. I will take the Groenland, and so it's about the resources. So you have its national interest, and say that, but in very rude terms, without any consideration for the allies, and it's a little bit America alone. How long it could take with that, I don't know, because it's quite a strange experience. In fact, the part of clash of civilization, in fact, is more with the support for Israel. Because in this case, you have a strong mobilization of the Christian Zionists in the United States, supporting Trump supporting Netanyahu, and it's clearly against Islamists, but against to the Islamic world and for the sake of Israel. So I think it's quite yes, perceptive, and to that too, feeling strongly the cultural differences, but be just more in this kind of intent of deal with the different partner at the global level. But it's true now, I think, that for something like searching the peace in the nears will not be possible with Trump, that of course, and with this quite crazy idea to withdraw all of the population of Gaza to create a resort. Strange.
Thank you. So we have 30 minutes for questions. We can take 1-2 questions. We try to be short, but don't hesitate to comment and to ask Mr. Dubertrand whatever you think.
Excuse me, Mr. Dubertrand. The title of your conference is a question. So the answer of it in one word, this is my first question. Is it catastrophic or hopeful? The other question is, since you talked about the future, can you see a scenario where the same religion fights its own? Like we talk of Christianity with Catholics, Protestants against evangelists. We can talk within the Hebraic religion of Zionism and true Hebraism that doesn't match, like the New Yorkese Jewish community is burning Israel's flags in the street today. On the other side, within Islam, because I don't really believe within this so-called peace between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Does the Shia and the Sunni will be future enemies? Even within Buddhism, you have let's say a version of Buddhism called Shintoism that have been disastrous in the past. And seeing the new direction that the Japanese governments are taking, they're leading to square one with Shintoism and rearming. So my question is, because the idea of the clash of civilization is very tempting, that it even used religion as a populist, let's say, aim. But I'm afraid that within the religions, we have weak points and it can implode somehow.
Yes, thank you. The first response is about to say only some words. Yes, there is an impact of the religious factor of international relationships, and yes, we believe it's quite ambivalent in fact. And we wrote the book because before it was this tendency to underestimate completely the religious factor. It has to be taken into consideration. It's not all of the international relation ambivalent effects, but it's there. About the second question and the clash of civilization, and if it's an interesting remark to say that you could have the clash and the divide inside the religion themselves. Or only to take the example of the Israelo-Palestinian conflicts, you have this strong alliance between the Christian Zionists of the United States, with the Unified Coalition Christian for Israel, to strong lobbies and groups, and with the religious Zionist party in Israel. a strong alliance. From the other side, and including with the Palestinian Christians, but in the United States, you have different Catholic and Protestant. They don't agree with that. And they say, no, we are here to research the peace and the solution for the two states. And you mentioned Islam, of course, after you will have strong divide. Myself, personally, I think that you have strong complexities and divide, but that the main divide today is between political Islam from one side and, let's say, traditional Islam from the other side. The fight is about that, but you have a lot of diversity in all the religions.
Thank you very much. I have two questions, in fact. You spoke about the religious recomposition in the world, then you concluded with the 7 civilizations which might come into clash, according to Samuel. So I would like to ask you, my first question is, do you consider fiducia supplicans as a religious reconstruction? If yes, do you think that it had, do you consider fiducia supplicans, fiducia supplicans, the document of the Catholic Church on homosexuality, because it's a new thing, it's a very important shift in the Catholic Church. So do you think that is a new reconstruction? And if yes, did it have any diplomatic impact on the Catholic diplomacy with the other religions, especially Islam? Thank you.
Yes, about the 7 civilization, it's not me. It's Huntington saying that, you know, in the 90s. And about the document, I am sorry, but I didn't read the document itself. So difficult for me to respond. It will be more the general answer about the text of the Catholic Church from Vatican II till now. There are like steps, in fact, and for the interreligious dialogue, and with more and more openness, and you see with the words and the actions too of the different popes. So I think you have a kind of a trend, the kind of a path which is quite clear now.
Thank you very much for a very interesting lecture. I have 1 comment and 2 questions. Regarding the research question, what impact do religions have on international relations today? Could we not say that religions always have had an important impact on international relations, both today and in the past, but that because of 9/11, that has become more or less a catalyst for the reassessment of the role of religion by Western scholars, whereas Western scholars before 9/11 perhaps were not so sensitive to the impact religions had on international relations, but because of 9/11, Western scholars became more sensitive to the impact religions have on international relations. And then I was wondering, would you agree with the statement that religious phenomena have an increasingly transnational character compared to a couple of decades ago? For instance, when we look at the prominence of the human rights in general on the international agenda, one could say that there is a tension, right, between our Western concepts of civil rights and women's rights versus Muslim concepts of the traditional role of women. And then finally, I don't want to be nitpicking, but when we look at, for instance, research done by Jonathan Fox, he uses a research which is related to the state failure data set. So at a certain point in your talk, you mentioned that in the 70s, 25% of conflicts had a religious nature. And then you referred to 70% in 2004, which I find a very high figure. So according to the state failure data set in 2003, that would have been 60%. How would you explain that difference in 10%? Were you referring at a different study, or to what study were you referring, and what methodology did that use to assess the religious nature of a conflict?
Okay, thank you very much. Briefly on the three themes. The first I think about the 11th of September, it was a strong shock, of course, in the United States and in the world. And this debate about Islam, the Islamic world, terrorism, and the clash of civilization rose up a lot at this moment. But it is true too that the awakening or the return of religion was from the 70s, and that after that it was all a process. 2001 was important in terms of strong perception, I think, by the public first, and after, of course, you have the choice of the American policy about Iraq and about Afghanistan and Iraq. So in some years, it changed the situation in the Middle East by the choice of the governments. About civilization, religion, and human rights, it's a very interesting topics. We treated that in the book too, because it is true that you have, and by the United Nations and the Declaration, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, a conception of the human rights which is more for Western and liberal origin, but it was adopted and accepted by the international community of this time, and persons for different countries participate to the redaction of the declaration. But now, and during this 20, 30 years past, you have a kind of debate, or some countries, people, intellectuals say, no, that's your Western rights. It's not what we want to do with the human rights in our culture, and they say with our religion. It doesn't fit with our religion. But having said that, it is true too that in many, many countries, when it's possible to have free expression, not everybody agree with that. You have persons that say, yes, a part of this is very Western, it's not for us, and so, but there is too a common ground. There is something about humanity with basic rights of the person for integrity, life, liberty, and this is a common thing to all the humans. No, so the debate, it's not, for the moment, I see it like not a monolithic debate between the West and the rest, but anyway, it is a debate. And for the diplomats, when you have the negotiation with, in the framework of the United Nations, you have strong debate about that. I remember the time when you have the EU and the United States from one side, and from the other side, the organization, the Islamic Cooperation, about defamation of religion. Could you talk freely about religion and the fund of the religion or not? That's the point. The debate is going on that. And about the figures, I will check the study. It was an American study made by different scholars. I don't remember exactly if it is Jonathan Fox or no, Jeffrey Oates. I will check that. Of course, we could accept that in this case of study, not easy to have very accurate, or the meaning of accurate figures. It's more about the trend, you know. For me, it's not about the 70%, but it's about the change of justification in 40 years.
I would like to hear about you, from you, about this idea of instrumentalization of religion, which is a concept very used in ecclesiastical documents, but not only. For example, also from El Azhar, from, okay, and in history, you spoke about Caesaropapism, political Islam, Iran, other things. Do you think that this paradigm is the correct instrumentalization of religion? Because I think all religions have a social project. So the religions have an impact on the societies. Okay, not all the religions or the leaders, religious leaders, are appointed by the states. Many countries do this. The imams are appointed in many countries. For the clergy, it's quite different, but you can find somewhere some agreement between the state and the bishops, for example. But instrumentalization of religion, we find this expression also in the document of signed at Abu Dhabi. Do you think it is a correct expression to express that religion should be automatically free from any kind of influence from outside, a kind of pureness of religion? And maybe there is a second question here about the true religion, because we speak about this, I've heard this expression also, true Islam, true, so there is a war of words behind this. Who is capable to decide I'm absolutely free from all those influence and to say that I am the correct creed?
Well, they are really difficult questions, in fact, because about the first one, instrumentalization, it's true that if you have the document of Abu Dhabi, it means that between the Catholic and the Muslims and the religious leaders, you have a very high conception of the moral and spiritual values being in common, and that the role of the dialogue with the PISAI in particular involve these very high values in common. You say that are our share, what we share, that what we want to promote, and the rest, in fact, is pure instrumentalization by the political actors or activists and so, and it's not at all at the same level. At the same time, it's quite normal and good to have the religious leaders of the different religion saying that. I think it's important. They have to say that, including Samuel Huntington, when at the end, in conclusion of the book about the clash of civilization, he say, I don't say it will be the war every day and with all the civilization and so. And he say, and there is something in common. It's like a kind of heritage of thought, spirituality, common moral values, high culture that you can encounter in different civilization. And at some stage, it's like a common heritage between the civilization and more or less between the religion. So I think quite normal for the religious leader to say that. At the same time, after it's a complicated debate about the truth. Because, for example, if you are in a religion and you say you have the majority, I am the official and I am the majority church, The other one, there are heretics. It's a minority with strange views. Or for political Islam today, you have a majority of the clerks in Islam, the ulema, they say, no, that's not the traditional Islam of the majority of the people. That's not what we have said during centuries and centuries of the Islamic tradition. It's not the Islamic tradition, it's false. But it's a philosophical and the religious debate too about what is the truth and where is the truth.
I would like to ask a question. You mentioned that Saudi Arabia and Egypt, they are not in for political Islam, if I understood you correctly. And if that is so, where can we draw the line, the thin line between an Islamic state like Saudi Arabia, which is difficult to distinguish between the religion and the state, and a political Islam? What are the differences?
Sorry. Yes, Saudi Arabia from the 18th century and after from 1930, 32 as a state, you have this strong alliance between one family, Al Saud, and the Wahhabites. And it was very, very strong with everything we know about the confusion between the state and the religion, exportation of Salafism in the world, and so. But it is true too that from 2017, with the arrival of the prince with Mohammed bin Salman, he decided progressively to change the line, telling one, I want to modernize Saudi Arabia. Second, I want a kind of separation with religion. In fact, in the control of the clerks. It means that the Salafist clerks of Saudi Arabia today could not continue to say, we want that, we want that. The control of the state is very, very, very strong. And third, it creates, because his conviction about the interest, the good of Saudi Arabia for the future, it's against political Islam, but it means the Muslim brothers from a long time, but it means to the political Salafist too. And he decided to create a kind of alliance with the Emirates and with Egypt that we have a word in French, which is the éradicateur, puissance éradicatrice. And it means that there are powers in the Arab world with others too. They want to fight against political Islam. They want to eradicate political Islam in the different forms in the region, which of course is not the case of Turkey, which is with an Islamist moderate government, and which is not the case of Qatar, because Qatar is supporting the Muslim Brothers till now and Hamas. But I think you can discuss that, but at the same time, and we talk about that here, you know, when during other conferences, I strongly believe for the region, it was a kind of turning point, which the change of attitude of Saudi Arabia. Now.
Thank you for your conference, but I have one question. And if I saw, I see here lecture on geopolitics of religions, and at the level on international relation, what hypothesis can be made about the impact of the new Syrian government? Thank you.
I want the president of the PISAI to answer this question.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the last part? Because I was not ready to answer the question.
He doesn't want to understand.
What hypothesis can be about the impact of the new government, Syrian government
Yes.
today?
Yeah, it is not easy to answer because really we have no idea. I was talking with Mr. Dubertrand today just about it, that we cannot imagine the future of Syria because we have many elements, many factors that can decide. So Turkey is now in agitation, in crisis. So if Erdogan will change, so in Syria, the government will change. And there are many, many problems now about these massacres, these of Alawites in Syria. It's a very big question for this government. So to prove that he's serious and they want really to realize democracy in Syria, freedom and equality for our minorities, that is not easy. Because the origin of this government is not really political, is not really pure, not clean. They had this government had a very bad history. This group killed Christians in Syria before they took the power. So it is not easy to say something. The president of Syria now, Al-Shara, tries to give some hope, some good ideas about his government, but really there is a gap between what he says and what he does, and he doesn't have a perfect control on all the jihadists that they work with him. So let us see what will happen in the future.
Thank you very much. Actually, there is a kind of reflection that is going on in my heart, in my mind after listening to your exposition, and then the answer that you are giving. Something that came particularly after you answered Laurent's question about using religion, no? His insistence on the fact that maybe whether we can think of religion as something that is pure, that cannot be utilized. It made me to think whether even what we are doing here, are we not trying not to see the impact on, the question to reformulate the whole thing, you know, the impact on religion, not on international relations today, whether it is not because we see that religion has that power that you mentioned, citing one author, a French author, who is talking about religion as something that gives a strong identity inside and exclude the others, those who are not inside. That actually politicians, intellectuals, perhaps even ourselves who are working into interreligious dialogue, we look at that power that is within religion, and we try not to use it, not to see the good thing that we can get out of it, maybe out of, not necessarily because we have bad ideas. And I'm thinking that whether this exercise itself in diplomatic area, then it will be to see it as that power that we can observe how it's impacting different areas. Also, this idea came because in this document on human fraternity, the question is actually not, God does not need to be defended. So it is the interpretation that we make of God and the way that we think that our God needs to be defended that create wars among ourselves. So basically, religion themselves and ideals, they are good, but it is because we want to have them to serve us that creates tension. I like the way that the 4 areas, actually there are tensions in Latin America, evangelicals, how they will go. In India, how it will go. In China, Sinicization, well, freedom, religious freedom, together with Sinicization. So there is always a tension. But I think
what is behind all this? They have an agenda to use this religion for their own power. So I don't know whether you might be agreeing with this realization that I'm finding after listening to you, that actually religion is good, but one way or the other, whether it's interreligious dialogue, whether it is in politics, whether it is, we are using it because we want to get a kind of advantage from it.
Yes, you know, I would just before we're talking about the truth. When we wrote the book, it was in the context of the university, so it was really in social sciences and no confessional approach. So that's a type of analysis. Of course, you could have a different approach, which is a religious one, by theologian. And I am sure that if you have theologian writing this book about the influence of the church, the influence of God in history, it will be different because you are inside the system of beliefs. And what I didn't say, but which is truly important, it's religion, it's not a matter like other social facts or social matters, in fact, because it's the notion is that it's something separated, it's sacred, in fact. So it's separated from the rest. So you enter in other logic, other claims. You have the relationship with the invisible, supernatural. It could be a transcendent God or not, but you are at another level of reality, in fact. And so if you take into consideration this other level of reality from inside, you will have a different picture of the world. It could be about eschatology, for example, the end of time. It could be about many things, and you have many religious writing themselves about that. But we were not in this approach. We were in the approach, which is the approach of about the actors telling, be careful because religion is important. Because the problem is that with the many Western scholars during many years, it was a theory telling no, religion is not explaining things. There are political factors, economy, social, and so. And so we say, no, it's a domain you have to take into consideration. It could explain and imply many things. And inside that, the second approach, you have, of course, the game of the actors. They could act from the religion with the beliefs and conviction. I think it's a lot of time that the case, in fact, but you could have a political leader wanted to use in a very cynical way the religious beliefs of the community for a political advantage. I think there are many examples of that. Yeah.
Microphone. No, you want to ask a question. It's coming. Oh.
Hello?
Okay. Yeah, you can
Hello?
speak. Okay.
Okay, am I on?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, Father Emmanuel Unamba, calling from Abuja, Nigeria. I thank the presenter, Mr. Roland, and I thank the President PISAI. Very happy to be connected back to you. My question is this: in a country where there is a religious homogeneity in such a way that is affiliated to one particular religion, it's very easy for them to take a position on religious issues, which may be contrary to world peace and good international relations. In a country like Nigeria, where we are equally divided between Christians and Muslims, you can't really take a decision on that issue. So it appears that instead of what has been talked about, clash of civilization, which I may refer to as clash of religions now, can we talk of synthesis of religion in such a way that this synthesis will bring about a good international relations? Because when you are highly affiliated to one particular religion, there's no how you will not be inclined towards defending that religion. The presenter have made allusion to this fact. Religion is important, but when you incline so much to it, it may be difficult for you to be balanced and then achieve a very good international relation. It shouldn't be thrown away like what the secularists try to do, but can we synthesize and come out with the good values in these religions and then use it to make a very good international relationship? So my question is, religious synthesis, is it possible? Can we promote that instead of clash of religion or clash of civilization? Thank you so much.
Yes, it's true first that what we can religion or the religious factors is first important at the internal level first, before to exist in the international relationships and in the world. It is really inside the state, like in Nigeria, that you can have the big stakes. And with religions, you could have a situation of conflicts of religion and the state having an external policy without taking into consideration exactly the situation, but it's a little bit fragile to do that. In reality, it's internally in the country that you have really this necessity normally to have this dialogue and appeasement between the religions and to try to see that some conflicts between the communities, and we talk about that, the conflict about the communities, they will be rooted with political aspects, social, economic, and regional, in many cases, aspects. And it could be possible for the religious leaders to some extent to try to extract the religious matters of that and to try to participate in the process of appeasement. In fact, that will be normally the solution at the internal level.
So we are at the end. Thank you very much again for this lecture and for all what you do for us at PISAI. And we hope to listen to you much more and in many other occasions. So it will be helpful for us, for the community of PISAI, just to grow up. So thanks all for your presence, because PISAI lives from your presence, and more you are, we are happier that we can live together these moments. I want to announce just the next lecture, just about very beautiful topic. So you have to come. It is about love in Islam. So 29th May. So in this library, we will have this topic. So it will be something very special. Thank you and have a nice evening.
Thank you, Mr. President.